Picture a stone hall on a quiet island, its doorway hung with lion and wolf pelts, its floor scattered with acorns and mast, the way a farmer scatters feed for hogs. Except the lions and wolves lying at that doorway are not truly beasts at all, and the creatures rooting through that feed on hooves and haunches were, only that morning, sailors. Deep in the forest beyond the hall, a herd of pigs presses together inside a low wooden pen, squealing in voices that sound, if anyone stopped to listen closely, almost human. What kind of power turns a grown man into a pig with nothing more than a wand, a song, and a cup of drugged wine? Such power belongs to Circe, daughter of the sun god Helios, the enchantress who ruled the island of Aeaea alone, one of the strangest, most misjudged figures in all of Greek myth. Storytellers across the centuries have called her a witch, a temptress, a monster wearing a beautiful woman's face. Yet the oldest version of her story is stranger and far more interesting than any of those labels. A tale of a goddess who lived in exile on her own terms, who defended her island with a power no mortal could match, and who was met, at last, by a man clever enough not to fear her. If you enjoy these stories, take a moment to subscribe. It truly helps this channel, and tell me in the comments which myth you'd like next. Now set sail for the island where the trees seem to watch, and meet the goddess who ruled it alone. Circe was born into a family that unsettled even the other gods. Her father was Helios, the titan who drove the sun itself across the sky each day. Her mother was Perse, an ocean nymph carrying old and strange magic in her blood. Among her brothers and sisters were Aeaea, the king who would one day guard the Golden Fleece, and Pasiphae, whose own story ran just as dark as Circe's ever did. Power over transformation seemed to run through that family like a current, and Circe mastered hers early, gathering the pharmaca, the potent roots, flowers, and herbs said to carry the strength of gods, that grew scattered across the ancient world. Some accounts say she was banished to the lonely island of Aeaea after a poisoning gone wrong. Others simply say she chose the isolation herself, weary of a world that only ever wanted to use her gifts or fear them. Either way, by the time her story crosses paths with Odysseus, she had lived alone on Aeaea for years, attended only by nymphs and by animals that were not quite animals, lions and wolves that moved through her halls with strange, watchful, almost pleading eyes, tamed not by whips but by her spellcraft. Days passed at her loom, where she wove cloth of impossible fineness while singing to herself in a clear, high voice that carried out over the cliffs and the sea. Beautiful as the island was, for any sailor unlucky enough to land there, it ranked among the most dangerous places in the ancient world. By the time Odysseus's ships reached the shores of Aeaea, his fleet was already a shadow of what it had once been. He had left Troy 10 years earlier with a dozen ships and hundreds of men, and disaster after disaster along the way home had worn that number down to almost nothing. Storms, a cave ruled by a man-eating giant, an entire harbor of monstrous raiders who had smashed 11 of his 12 ships to splinters in a single night. Only one ship remained, and the men aboard it were exhausted, grieving, and afraid to explore any new shore at all. For 2 full days, they simply lay on the beach of Aeaea, too shaken to move. On the 3rd day, Odysseus climbed a height and spotted smoke rising from somewhere inland, curling up through the trees from what looked like a grand hall. Splitting his remaining men into 2 companies, he drew lots to decide who would investigate, and the lot fell to a company led by his trusted lieutenant, Eurylochus. 22 men set off through Circe's forest, and as they walked, something began to feel wrong. Wolves and mountain lions padded out of the undergrowth to meet them, and instead of attacking, the beasts nuzzled against the sailors like hounds, greeting a returning master, rearing up on their hind legs with an eerie, almost pleading intelligence in their eyes. Beyond the animals stood a polished stone hall, and from somewhere inside it came the sound of a woman singing at her loom, a voice so lovely that the frightened sailors, against every instinct, found themselves calling out and asking to be let in. Circe answered the call at once, opening her doors and welcoming the sailors in with every appearance of warm hospitality. Chairs draped in fine cloth were set around her tables, and a rich meal of cheese, barley, and pale honey, all mixed into a deep bowl of wine, was served before them. Only Eurylochus held back, some old instinct warning him not to cross her threshold, and he watched from outside while his companions ate and drank everything she offered. What the men did not know was that Circe had stirred a drug into the food, drawn from her deep knowledge of pharmaca, a potion that erased a traveler's memory of home the instant it was swallowed. As soon as the meal was finished, she rose, crossed the hall, and struck each man in turn with her slender wand. One by one, gasping only a little as it happened, the sailors began to change, bristles sprouting across their skin, their backs curving forward, their hands and feet coarsening into hooves, until where 21 Ithacan men had sat, there now crowded a pen of frightened swine. Strangest of all, their minds stayed entirely human, trapped inside animal bodies, while Circe herded them out to her sty and threw down acorns and mast for them to eat. The same feed pigs have always eaten, though these particular pigs understood exactly what had happened to them and grieved without being able to form a single word. Eurylochus, watching from the tree line in horror, did not wait to see any more, and he turned and ran the whole way back to the shore to warn his king. Odysseus listened to Eurylochus' shaking account and made an immediate decision. He would go to the hall himself, alone, and see his men freed or die trying. Eurylochus begged him not to go, certain that anyone who walked into that forest would never walk out of it, but Odysseus buckled on his sword and set off regardless, following the same path his men had taken. Not far along that path, a young man stepped out from among the trees to meet him, golden-sandaled and quick-eyed in a way no mortal ever quite managed, for this was Hermes, messenger of Olympus, come down to warn him himself. Hermes described plainly what waited in the hall ahead: the wine, the wand, the sty full of transformed men. Then, reaching down into the grass, the god pulled up a small plant with a black root and a milk-white flower, a herb called moly, perilous for mortal hands to dig, but harmless once given as a gift. "Carry this," Hermes told him, "and Circe's drugs will hold no power over you. When she strikes you with her wand and nothing happens, draw your sword and rush at her as though you mean to kill her. She will be afraid, and she will beg for mercy and try to win your trust with every comfort she can offer." Before accepting anything from her, Hermes warned, make her swear a binding oath by the gods that she intends no further harm. Only then would Odysseus be truly safe beneath her roof. Thanking the god, Odysseus tucked the strange root into his cloak and walked on alone toward the smoke still rising over the trees. Inside the hall, Circe received Odysseus exactly as she had received his men, courteous, warm, with no sign that a pen of transformed sailors waited a stone's throw from her door. Wine mixed with her potion was poured, and she watched for the familiar drowsy confusion to spread across his face. It never came. Odysseus drained the cup and remained entirely himself, thanks to the hidden herb, and when Circe raised her wand and struck him as she had struck the others, ordering him to the sty, nothing happened at all. Drawing his sword at once, he rushed at her, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Circe felt real fear. Dropping to her knees, she begged him not to strike and asked who he was, since no mortal had ever swallowed that potion and remained unchanged. Only one man was ever fated to do it, a warning she had heard long ago, a man named Odysseus, sailing home from the ruin of Troy. Odysseus made her swear the binding oath the god had described, and only once she had sworn it by every god who could hear did he lower his blade. Something in Circe seemed to loosen once the danger had passed. Relief, or perhaps something closer to recognition, as though she had waited on her lonely island for someone able to meet her as an equal rather than as prey or worshipper. True to her oath, she led Odysseus down to the sty and rubbed each transformed sailor with a different herb until, one by one, the bristles fell away and the hooves smoothed back into hands and feet. And the men of Ithaca stood upright again, taller and younger looking than before, weeping with relief as they embraced their king. What followed was a year unlike any other in Odysseus's long journey home. Circe welcomed the entire crew into her hall, feasting them nightly on bread, meat, and wine, until the ragged, grieving sailors began, slowly, to resemble men again rather than survivors. Odysseus himself stayed on as Circe's honored guest, and in the careful way the old poets tell it, the two shared her hall and each other's company for the length of that year. Goddess and mortal king, drawn together by something never quite named aloud. Whatever passed between them seems to have mattered to Circe as more than one more visitor to her shores. Here, at last, was a man who had resisted her magic and matched her wit, who spoke with her, rather than merely obeying or fleeing her. And for a goddess who had spent lonely seasons watching sailors either flee in terror or lose themselves to her power, that kind of company may have been rarer to her than any spell she owned. A year is a long time to a homesick crew, though, and eventually the men grew restless, remembering the wives, sons, and fathers waiting on an Ithaca unseen for over a decade. Cautious as ever, it was Eurylochus who finally found the nerve to pull Odysseus aside and remind him that a king who forgets his home is no king at all. That same night, Odysseus went to Circe and asked, at last, to be released, to continue the voyage begun so long ago toward the wife and son who might no longer even remember his face. Circe did not try to stop him. Instead, she told him only that the road home would not run straight, that before he could sail for Ithaca, he would first have to sail somewhere no living man was meant to go, down into the land of the dead, the gray, sunless kingdom of Hades, to speak with the shade of the blind prophet Tiresias, the one dead man whose mind the underworld had left untouched. Only Tiresias, she said, could tell him the rest of the way home. Exact instructions followed, where to beach his ship on the far shore of the river of Ocean, how to dig a trench and pour offerings of milk, honey, wine, and water into the earth, how to let the blood of a sacrificed ram and ewe fill the pit so the thin, whispering shades of the dead could gather and, for a moment, speak again. Giving him that knowledge was a strange gift for a woman who might have wished to keep him. Not a spell to bind him closer, but the exact directions he needed to leave her for good. Before he sailed, she warned him too of what still lay beyond the land of the dead, the deadly song of the sirens, the narrow strait guarded by the monster Scylla, and the whirlpool called Charybdis, dangers no sailor had ever survived to describe firsthand. Her hospitality had been given, then her healing, and finally her hardest-won knowledge. And all of it without once trying to hold him back. Odysseus sailed on from Aeaea into the land of the dead, and then out again into the last dangerous stretch of his 10-year voyage home. And in most retellings, Circe simply fades from the story once her part in it is finished. Such an ending has always felt unfinished. Later writers, uneasy with a woman who held real power and used it entirely on her own terms, folded Circe into a simpler shape. Witch, seductress, cautionary tale about a woman alone on an island. Yet the oldest telling gives her something far more interesting than villainy. Ruling land she had claimed for herself by her own rules, she punished those who threatened her, not out of cruelty, but the way any ruler defends a kingdom, and showed generosity, wisdom, and even tenderness toward the one man who treated her as something other than a monster to be slain or a prize to be won. Eurylochus's fear was allowed to stand without punishment. Her oath, once given, was kept to the letter. And when the time came to let Odysseus go, she did not curse him or trap him. She armed him with the knowledge he needed and sent him back out to sea. Perhaps that is the truest version of her story, not a witch to be feared, but a woman who built herself a kingdom out of exile, and who, for one brief year, was finally met by someone willing to see all of it. If you enjoy these stories, take a moment to subscribe and tell me in the comments which myth I should tell next. Sleep well.